Hello, my name is Elena Sabinson, and today we're going to talk about pheB, plant-human embodied biofeedback, a soft robotic surface for emotion regulation in confined physical space. This paper is co-authored by Isha Pradhan and Dr. Keith Green from the Architectural Robotics Lab at Cornell University. Why pheB? Here we have several images of our prototype pheB. And today we're going to start by talking about the motivations and framework behind our design. Many of us find ourselves in the position where we have a lot less access to nature, and at the same time are increasingly living in cities with high rates of urban density. In our daily lives, we're spending an increasing amount of time interacting with digital technologies. This is the condition that many of us find ourselves living in, a reduction of interaction with our natural settings, and an increase of people living within confined urban spaces. Given this, there is an urgent need to rethink the design of domestic settings. This is prompted by climate change, our growing population, rapid urbanization, global pandemics such as COVID-19, and limited access to nature. There are two frameworks that guide our work: interoception and biophilia. Interoception is the ability to sense one's own internal physiological states. For example, the ability to feel your own heartbeat. Biophilia is the hypothesis that humans have an intrinsic attachment to nature. When we refer to confined physical space homes, they may look something like this. For example, a microhome, a small apartment of around 200 square feet or less, often found in tall vertical cities of areas with large rapid urbanization. Looking further into the future, we might consider spacecrafts or submarines, capsule habitats that allow us to live in extreme environments that are not currently inhabitable to people. These confined spaces can stress inhabitants due to separation from nature and prolonged social isolation. We know that nature has a restorative effect, and we know that humans suffer in emotional well-being when they don't have access to their community. Our hypothesis is that embedding ecologically rich, interactive biofeedback interfaces into domestic architecture can enrich the experience of living in a confined, isolated space. We have two primary goals. First, to improve the emotional well-being of inhabitants of confined physical space through biofeedback and other cyber-physical mediated behavioral interventions. And second, to provide a connection to nature that can amplify the restorative effects through biophilic elements in a small footprint. We have two primary research questions. 1. Do tangible embodied interaction modalities increase the effectiveness of mindful breathing practices and biofeedback? And 2. Do tangible embodied representations of a plant's internal states amplify the restorative effects of nature through an expressive interaction? Design concept. pheB provides inhabitants with therapeutic support manifested as gentle, responsive behaviors of a soft robot, which is shaped by computational transformations of electrical signals emitted by both plants and humans. Here we see an overview of our design system. In the center, a human figure is standing in front of a rendered image of a pheB surface. Biodata is collected both from a human user in the form of a heart rate signal and the plant electrical signal that's emitted by integrated plant life. These two biodata signals are used to input into an air control system, which controls the inflation patterns of the pheB surface. Here we see pheB embedded in different interior spatial arrangements to assess different architectural typologies and how they might steer our design. For example, in a submarine, we envision pheB might be a wall-to-wall swath. In a microhome, pheB might be installed as a floor-to-ceiling panel. Or perhaps in a spacecraft, pheB might be seen as a rail encircling the room. Prototyping pheB. To date, we have established proof of concept for the use of simple, inexpensive surface-mounted electrodes to record the electrical signals emitted by plants in response to shifts in their environmental stimuli. In the image on the right, you see a plant signal plot recorded from a plant's electrical signals that were output in response to the lights being turned on and off in the environment. When the lights were on, the plant emits a higher voltage. When the lights are turned off, immediately the voltage is reduced. This means that we can use these patterns of state changes to create different behaviors in our pheB surface. Fabrication. pheB is a pneumatic silicone surface made through an underlying grid of interior air chambers which can inflate to create its behavior. We created a computational algorithm using Rhino 3D and Grasshopper, which allows us to create many different grids and corresponding molds which can be used to cast the silicone surface used to generate the final prototype. Here's a closer look at our biophilic surface development. One of the ways that we are reinforcing the biophilic sensibility of our design is by using images of nature for design generators. Here we took a bitmap image of nature and brought it into our CAD software, where we traced identified features and used those as repulsive or attractive forces for our grid surface. pheB's behavior is controlled in part by the underlying grid pattern of the surface. Larger cells lead to larger inflation swells, whereas smaller cells lead to smaller areas of inflation. In order to get the most out of our early prototypes, we performed diagrammatic analysis to assess how the underlying grid resulted in the corresponding behavior of the pheB surface. We also looked at strategies for different air channel pathways to control the behavior of the pneumatic surface. Depending on how the air travels from one cell to the other, different intrinsic behaviors emerge from the design. User testing, the development of our online questionnaire, and an early in-person pilot study. To iterate on our design, we first wanted to assess users' perceptions of the pheB surface. While our computational algorithm allows us to quickly iterate and create a series of different designs, the cost of silicone and the time to produce a final prototype is still relatively high. Thus, we decided to create a series of digital images to assess user perceptions. Here we see 3 different animated GIFs of the pheB surface, shown at different scales. Here, users were asked on their preferences for different widths, shown in a horizontal orientation, a vertical orientation, and finally, pheB is seen in several different colorways. Participants were asked to group the images of pheB in 3 categories: exciting, relaxing, and neutral. Guided breathing exercises. In addition to assessing user preferences for the design of pheB, we also wanted to evaluate how effective pheB was at leading guided breathing exercises. To test this, participants were asked to perform guided breathing exercises in 2 conditions. First, a 2D visualization, and second, with the pheB surface, which provides more tangible embodied interaction. In the 2D visualization, a circle is used to help pace users' inhalations and exhalations. In the embodied interactions, users follow pheB's inflation to pace their own breathing. Participants performed the breathing exercises through our online questionnaire and during our in-person pilot study, which had 5 participants. After the breathing exercises were conducted, participants were invited to touch and interact with the prototype. Feedback was elicited through unstructured interviews. We found that participants responded positively to the design. Many compared pheB to natural analogs, such as jellyfish, plant cells, and a crater on Mars. This suggests that pheB does invoke a biophilic sensibility, possible of inducing restoration. Early results also suggest that pheB-led breathing exercises increase users' perceptions of co-embodied breathing. One participant noted that pheB was doing what they were feeling. This may indicate that pheB was a more effective guide than the 2D visualization. Currently, we are working to develop more algorithms to control pheB's movement. Using MATLAB, we have created a sinusoidal wave algorithm so that pheB can simulate the soothing pattern of ocean waves through its inflation pattern. We plan to test the restorative effect of this behavior. We are also working towards a longitudinal study where users will spend time with pheB in a confined space to evaluate its therapeutic effectiveness. We believe this work contributes knowledge towards developing novel biofeedback modalities and offers a design exemplar for interactive artifacts that nurture meaningful relationships with nature.